Hey guys, what is going on right here, and welcome back to another Cards and Castles video. Today we're going back to the CNC Championships, but not going ahead and looking at some feature matches, but instead taking a look at the qualifiers in a sort of retrospective angle, kind of. We're actually going to be looking at the decks used throughout the tournament. I actually did end up compiling a sort of list of both the decks used in the first and second qualifier, not just the showcase matches either, pretty much the entirety of the tournament. So even if a person wasn't in the feature matches in any sort of regard, they'd still have their deck sort of featured here. But that's not to say that I'm going to show deck lists or anything. I'm just kind of, you'll see how that works in a minute. But I just kind of wanted to do this video because the CNC Championships, as they are right now, actually have no restrictions on what decks people can play. So no, no deck building stipulations, no ban lists, none of that stuff. This is pretty much whatever deck you want to bring into the field, you go ahead and do that. So I was kind of curious to see what direction people would take. Maybe if we saw more of a sort of meta emerge, some meta-ish decks, things like no interaction, things like School, maybe, for that's still running around. Mystic Rats, obviously, starting to take some shape now, or has been for some time. Or we're going to see some other decks, things that, we haven't really seen before. People trying new ideas out. It's a great testing field to do so. No rank on the line or anything. Could pretty much play any deck they want and see maybe where they stand in the in that sort of meta regard. And of course there were some big faces in this tournament, both in the first and second qualifier, so there were certainly different directions people took, and I think that really showcases itself in the actual qualifier data, which I'll showcase in a minute. So we are going to go ahead and jump right into it, but before we do that, I just want to take a quick moment to mention to you guys that over 40% of you guys who watch these videos aren't actually subscribed to the channel. So quick aside, go ahead and do so. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. It's the best way that you can show your support and help us grow. So yeah, I kind of want to get that little side out of the way. But with that being said, let's go ahead and take a look at the first qualifier and see what kind of decks actually took to the field. Alright folks, so let's go ahead and take a look at the first qualifier to start it off. Of course, represented by this image over here. Now, of course, this is pretty much all the decks taken inside that first qualifier. I believe 14 different decks in total, if my memory serves me correctly. And of course, before you say anything, no, Santa is not a visual representation of a Santa deck. Unfortunately, that is basically how I classified some of the decks that I couldn't really put a name to. Information I was given was kind of vague in some regards, and I didn't want to, of course, step out of line with maybe misclassifying the deck. So I sort of just threw that into an other category. But pretty much what you saw in that other category, you saw two Viking Crusader variants. I believe one was a Dwarf, potentially, and the other was a Blue-Yellow Knights, from what I gathered. And of course, the last one being a Red-Purple aggro deck. Pretty much all I got on that one was just Red-Purple aggro. So couldn't really put a card to it. So I just kind of classified them all in sort of a Santa section to kind of show that there are a bit of a, there were some different decks running around here. But you might notice that there's another sort of standout card when you look at that pie chart, and that, of course, being the Pumpkin. He actually represents a deck that I didn't expect to actually see in the first qualifier, but it did make an appearance and an impact for sure. And that is the Red-White aggro, the Druid Warlock aggro. Actually did fairly well in this tournament, piloted, I believe, well, under 3 different people. But actually one of those people took top in this first qualifier, that being XXD4, and I mean there were a bunch of other characters. I do forget them at this present time, so apologies on that. But he piloted it well, actually making a undefeated record of 5-0. Although he did mention to me afterwards, a lot of the red-white is built on sort of making sure you have a little bit of luck involved with that. You don't want to obviously want to use this all the time, but he just kind of wanted to throw it out there, see how it would do, and it actually ended up topping, so kind of surprising. But what's more surprising is how much we saw this variation. 3 people were running that, and of course next to that you'll see Saurus. Another 3 people piloted this, I believe, in the red-yellow Awakened territory. Not the classical purple Warlock, but instead the Warlock Crusader. Things like heals were prevalent, flying books for more draw, Knight of Flowers, but really what took this deck home was pretty much the big burn that it could deliver. You've got the dangerous Headwood Saurus combination. I believe one of the games in the feature match we saw, a multitude of Headwoods and Sauruses burn for an incredible amount of damage. And I will say, personally, just based on my opinion and because I've played this variant, I actually do find the Crusader Warlock variation of Awaken just slightly stronger than the classical red-purple. Of course, with red-purple, you have a heavy draw engine in that Sleeping Dojo, but what you miss out in the sort of Ronin and the movement in the draw engine when you get in Dojo is you get some pretty powerful yellow staples. You have Flying Books, which synergizes already with the Awaken. You've obviously got Knight of Flowers, which I mentioned, which can turn into another early beef stick. And of course, you've got heals. Things like Hands of the Saint and Arbiter always make a dangerous impact. So, no surprise why we saw this variation over the classical colors of Ninja Warlock, because I think what people feared most was actually a deck that we didn't see too much representation of, and that is the Mystic Rats. I believe 2 people ran this one. Certainly a deck that's been making an impact around the board lately, or around the leaderboard, I should say. A lot of people have picked up this deck, and I was kind of shocked that I didn't see more of it inside the tournament, but I guess, not everyone has tools to manufacture the Mystic Rats, or some people might have been unfamiliar with how to play Mystic Rats, so I guess it's understandable why we didn't really see that all too much. But, do note, it did make an appearance, at 2 nonetheless, not just at 1 slot, but at 2, so certainly an interesting deck to keep an eye out. I never like getting Mystic Rats, though, or like being Mystic Rats, I should say. That's never a fun experience. But of course, closing out this side of the board, you've also got 2 one-ofs, that being Last Will and Scope Koru at the bottom there, represented by the Andrew and Koru respectively. And it was good to see some staples of the, I don't want to say the older meta, because I certainly think Last Will is still a very prevalent deck. Same with Scope Koru, both very dangerous in their own right. You've got on one side Andrew and a bunch of Last Will tools, of course, followed by the burns and heals, like we mentioned in the Crusader Warlock Awakening deck. And then you've also got Scope Koru, which can be such a pain in the ass. Just Dwarven Scope tossed on a Koru, running around, just dicing them, dicing units left and right, going invisible, moving again until you have no resources left to throw onto the board here. So very scary deck in its own right. But yeah, this was certainly a surprise to see nonetheless. Pretty much the big story coming out of Qualifier 1, I believe, is just sort of the amount of red-white aggro that we saw. And it was incredible. And even getting at the top was also something that I just didn't expect to see happen. 5-0 with red-red aggro over things in the field like, Last Will, Mystic Rats, where I assume if a Mystic Rat hit the board against one of these guys, I would imagine they wouldn't fare too well considering how many tokens Mystic Rats can produce. And I guess maybe Flamestorm's carried in those red whites, so I guess maybe that was their answer to Mystic Rats. But yeah, certainly interesting nonetheless here. But with that being said, pretty much a overall solid qualifier. Again, I believe the top was, the top was definitely the red-white aggro, and then coming in second place was the red-yellow Awaken. So pretty neck and neck there, but I think both of or pretty much all 3 of the Awakened players faced a loss at some point, so unfortunately the top spot belongs to red-white aggro. Again, interesting nonetheless, and yeah, with that being said, let's go ahead and take a look at the second qualifier now and see what that field looked like. Alright, so moving into Qualifier 2. Now, not as populated as Qualifier 1. I believe there were only 6 participants that joined for this event. But still, equally as interesting as a field as the first qualifier here, represented by this pie chart right over here. Now, I think the big story coming out of this particular qualifier is the fact that War Party made a bit of a resurgence, coming out 2 spots out of the 8 that were competing. Definitely not fun to see War Party again personally, but I know some people have been kind of disappointed with War Party ever since they hit a lot of their big discard nerfs, a while back, where I think War Party and Frozen Storm picked up extra discards to kind of slow down the War Party decks a bit, make sure their boards maybe aren't as impactful, but still nice to see them kind of, I guess, make an appearance. As much as I do hate the deck, I do think it was fine to see something come out and fare quite well against the bigger contender of the pie chart, that being the No Interactions deck, piloted, or at least represented by Drain Life, but piloted by 3 different individuals, one of them being our current rank 1 Beastly. So that was interesting to kind of see that dynamic unfold there. I mean, War Party and No Interactions actually have a pretty interesting matchup. Of course, if No Interaction is fast enough, they could, of course, outburn the War Party, make sure they can't get to turn 10. But on the other side of things, you have War Party packing in small heal, well, not really small heals, but big heals like Hand of the Saint. And if they reach turn 10, they do pop that Dremoth for another 7 health on the castle. So I do think that matchup was pretty fair and pretty interesting to kind of take note of. Maybe that was intentional on the parts of the people who ran them. So maybe sort of a heads-up observation there. But yeah, interesting to see the War Party sort of take form. Unfortunately, War Party did not top. It did qualify with one of the pilots coming in second, Jesper 13. But of course, basically did take the Qualifier 2, piloting the No Interaction. So No Interaction kind of still proves itself that it is a pretty menacing top deck for sure. But, of course, on the other sides of the pie chart here, I can't leave out some of the other decks that we did see. Of course, Demonic Rage, representing the OTK Wizards, made an appearance. I believe another Ninja Warlock aggro, funny enough, made an appearance, represented by the Magic Eater there. And Warlock Pirate aggro, represented by the Incinerate up on the top there. Quite interesting to see different aggro decks take shape in this qualifier, and really across both when you look at it. I mean, there were 2 Ninja Warlock aggro decks, both not a very high representation, but still ended up showcasing themselves fairly well. And on top of that, you've got OTK Wizards, which, no surprise there. That one's been another sneaky little devil that's kind of or not really re-emerged, but kind of taken some form thanks to some ladder appearances. A lot of players, but some of the more top players actually sort of leeching onto the deck and doing quite well with it. So no shock that the innovator, I think, of OTK Wizards, Bolas, ended up running his star deck here. So pretty interesting to see that. But yeah, overall, interesting to see both aggro decks kind of, or at least different aggro decks emerge throughout the whole qualifier, mind you. Very interesting to kind of note that. But yeah, overall, solid work. Solid, a solid field here, I have to say. Well, I should say a solid work from all players and a solid field. I think that English got messed up. But anyway, yeah, it's quite the interesting little qualifier charts we've got. Now, of course, this is not the end of the CNC Championships. There will be more, so I'm expecting maybe to see some more decks, maybe some more variation in the charts as well as we move into qualifiers 3 and 4. Hopefully happening soon. They haven't been announced yet, but of course, if you want to jump on that, links to register for that will be down below. And yeah, with that being said, I think we've gotten all that we can from these qualifier charts here. A little interesting taste of maybe what you'll find not only in the championship, well, not only in the championships over here, but also maybe what you might find on the ladder. Of course, no doubt that some of these decks might appear in some of these people's laddering seasons, so make sure to keep an eye on that when you're hopping into the ladder. But with that being said, I believe we can move out the close of this video. And with that being said, folks, that does bring us to the conclusion of this video. Both qualifiers 1 and 2 now wrapped up in more ways than one. But with that being said, if you guys wanted to join in on future qualifiers, perhaps, of course, links to register for them will be in the description. Of course, qualifiers 3 and 4, plus maybe some open rounds, open invites for anyone who was knocked out of either qualifier can now take part in. Again, those will be announced later, of course, hopefully soon. We want to hopefully move that along fairly well. But With that being said, I hope you did enjoy the video nonetheless. Be sure to give it a like if you subscribe. Or be sure to give it a like, share with friends, of course, subscribe if you're new or haven't done so already. Best way to show your support here to the channel. Leave a comment down below, not only what you guys thought of maybe the qualifier data, if there's anything that kind of sparked your interest, but of course the new format that I did this in, a little bit of a change in the way I presented this. I didn't really know what direction to kind of take, if my normal style would be alright, so I wanted to try something new, and of course I came up with this. If you guys like it or hate it, let me know in the comments section below, and yeah, with that being said, guys, that's it for me for now, so until next time, stay gaming.